has now joined us full time as our producer, as one example of this investment we've had to make. So we're really delighted that Forecast, the app, which is basically a project management system that a lot of agencies use now. I've noticed a massive trend in the last sort of 6 months where a lot of agencies have suddenly been moving over to Forecast. I've had quite a few clients test it out. I've had some great feedback. So we've been talking to them for a little while now, and really like to announce they're gonna be one of our sponsors. So we're going to be making some changes to the vodcast. We're going to be upping the quality and the production values over the next couple of months as well, slickening things up a little bit because we kind of sort of started a bit rough and ready with this and gave it a go. And as most people say, most vodcasts don't last for more than 6 episodes or 6 months worth of episodes, and we're now a year into it. So thank you to Forecast. Also, a massive thank you and check them out, by the way. We'll put details about them in the show notes, and say we sent you. Second of all, I'd like to thank Wirehive. Caitlin, our producer, is there today in the Wirehive offices, the Wirehive studios studios in the offices. And although we have done one episode recently, the one with Daniel Priestley in there, we're now back remote today. And so we are, so I've got Piers in his offices in Guildford, although he does look like he's in B&Q. Just looking at the background right now, and Caitlin is actually in the studio, and I'm at home in Hampshire. So, less of the long introduction. Over to Piers Palmer now. So, Piers, tell me a little bit about Kyan. What does Kyan do as an agency today?
Okay, well, firstly, let me just say I'm delighted to be here this morning talking to you, Spencer, on your 30th episode.
It's a landmark episode.
Yeah, and it's really exciting. It's my first vodcast as well, so thank you for inviting me. So a little bit about Kyan. So where are we today? So today, based here in Guildford, we're a team of just over 40 product strategists, designers and engineers, and we refer to ourselves as a technology agency, and we help our clients improve their businesses through the use of tech. And we have a bit of a sweet spot that we've come across over the years around helping businesses build out cloud platforms. I think we've been through various kind of reincarnations along the way, but that's where we find ourselves today.
Amazing. And so let's go back to, so when did the agency start?
Quite a long time ago, and sometimes feels a bit embarrassing to say it because it makes me sound a lot older than, of course, I actually am. But we started way back at the end of 2002, start of 2003, and we were formed by myself and my 2 partners, Laurent and Gav, who are still both in the business. So that's been an interesting journey in itself. And we formed the agency then with a view to focus purely on the web. At that time, it didn't feel to us there were very many agencies that were focusing purely on web. And the web was this hugely exciting thing, this kind of merge of technology, art, media, and it was really exciting. It felt like this kind of Wild West frontier. And Kyan was formed with this idea of let's try and build a business around this. And of course we wanted to play to our own tune. So we got together, the 3 of us, and Laurent came from a technical background. Gav came from a design background. I also came from a design background. And we felt that we had all the skills that we needed then to start the business.
Brilliant. So today there's how many of you in the team? Is it about 45?
It is, no, it's just under that. I think it's 42 at the moment.
42. Okay. So you've gone through, that journey, over the last, 17 years, pretty much from, so it does sound like a long time when you say it like that, 17 years of going through really starting out as a web company today to being much more of a product and service design sort of, a business agency, technology company. So So what's interesting is that you must have had to sort of, and it's quite a big topic for me at the moment. I did a talk last week on it, and so I'm just curious about, how agencies can best evolve forwards, because as times change, their businesses are always under the threat of being maybe more commoditized. For example, like if you were a simple web design company today, just building brochure sites, in many cases there's the prices have dropped down low. There's loads of people can do it. There are tools that make that super accessible, like Squarespace and other companies. So for you, I guess you probably had to reinvent yourselves a little bit along the way.
Yeah, I think we certainly have. It's interesting. I think we have remained authentic to our roots, which was always that design and development part of web. But along the way, we've been a web design and development agency. We've been a digital product studio. Yeah. We've been a digital transformation agency, and now we're technology agency. So I think they are subtle pivots. But as you say, I think we realised probably 5-6 years ago that what we now call a website had become so commoditized. With the likes of Squarespace, WordPress coming into the market, that we had to try and move ourselves up the value chain, and we'd always had that sort of underlying geekiness. So it felt sort of very natural for us. And I suppose these days we probably only launch 3 or 4 websites a year, and often they're a small part of a larger project.
Yeah. So when you started off way back when, 17 years ago, the three of you, what was your vision for the business? Did you have one?
Not really. I think, probably back then it was excitement of actually playing our own tune, not having to listen to someone else and being our own bosses. That was exciting. And also, I touched on before, this idea of just focusing purely on the web. I think I remember I used to subscribe to a magazine called Mondo 2000, which sort of came out of California and was this kind of super 90s melding pot of things about smart drugs, technology, wetware, and the web felt this really exciting new frontier. So I think it was definitely about the excitement of being able to focus purely on that and play with technology and see what we could do with it and be our own boss. So that was definitely the early days, but that has changed a lot as we've gone along.
And where were your first offices?
They were in a little cupboard in a place called Smithbrook Kilns, which was on the A281 out towards Cranley, which is apparently the UK's largest village. But and we had a small room which the three of us set up in. And I remember the first hot summer, there was just the three of us, no air conditioning, shirts off, just crowded over our CRTs, beavering away. But we quickly grew out of that. And the good thing about Smithbrook Kilns is that they had lots of different size units, which we could upgrade to. But we quickly grew out of that. And it was very isolated as well. So if you didn't have a car, it was hard to get to. So after 5 or 6 years there, we took the jump to Guildford High Street.
Cool. And I think that's where I first kind of heard about you. I think when I think it's probably about 8 years ago. I feel like it's about 2012, where I was at an awards. Was it 2012 that you guys won the Wirehive Awards?
I think it was.
Around that year. And I remember going to this awards and you guys had won Best Agency Website. And I thought it was so funny because I live 20 minutes from Guildford. I kind of grew up going to Guildford. I built my business in Farnborough, which is, again, 15 minutes down the road. And I'd never heard of you guys. And then as I kind of saw you'd won that award for your website and I started to ask around, one of the things I really liked about you was that you were almost like the most respected agency in the area, or certainly in a quite a wide catchment area. Everyone I spoke to held you guys in high admiration. I think it was your work ethic and your approach and the obviously the output of the work you created. People loved. I mean, I know that you're changing your website, but I'd ask everyone to go and have a look at Kyan.com, Kyan.com. I do think you've got a very beautiful website. It's very clean. It just clearly communicates your culture, who you are as a business, and I think you've always come across as the nice guys. Does that sound like a fair observation of you?
Yeah, I mean that's nice of you to say. I think we've probably been a bit guilty of not standing up and shouting about ourselves in the past. I think we don't. I suppose putting ourselves in the limelight has never felt completely natural to us, and we've enjoyed just doing the work and letting the work stand on its own merits. So I think. I totally understand when you say that you hadn't heard of us, because I suppose we had kept quite quiet and kept ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah.
The only sort of outward facing external work that we did really was our WXG event, which is still running, which was really just, we wanted a way to bring the sort of tech community together around an event for the day. And we also wanted to put Guildford on the map as well. We felt there were lots of events happening up in London and in Brighton, but nothing in between. And so Guildford was meant to be that kind of middle point. We thought, how can we put Guildford on the map from...
What does WXG stand for?
Well, originally it stood for Web Expo Guildford. But now I think, for us, it has its own meaning now.
It's just WXG. So I must admit, soon as I had seen you won that award, I remember suddenly, I don't know, I must have suddenly got on a mailing list somewhere, but I suddenly got invited to WXG and I started to see it. And I loved that you brought that kind of technology event out to a more regional location. I'd seen it done in Birmingham with Canvas, another event, a tech event up there. And I think it's great when regional agencies bring out these things more into their areas and try and attract the organisations and talent in to kind of become part of their community. What's it like being based in Guildford and trying to run and scale a business? I mean, obviously COVID has disrupted and changed quite a bit, I think, around the need to be based in like large central locations. But up until this point, I mean, I guess, how do you find being in Guildford? Is it an easy place to grow a business, do you think?
I think it's probably easier now, but historically we have struggled a little bit to recruit. Actually, our main recruitment strategy was to try and find good quality agency folk who were looking to get out of London but still have a decent agency experience. So that was, so we would put ads on Guildford train stations saying, fed up with the commute but want to work for a good agency, come and work for us. So that was very much our positioning. And because what we do is we have our specialism in Ruby on Rails. Actually, Ruby on Rails engineers are quite hard to come by. So we definitely struggle from that perspective. But having said that, I think there's a lot to be said for being where we are. I mean, we're at the bottom of the high street. We're 35 minutes away from Waterloo, 5 minutes walk to the train station, and we've got the Surrey Hills right on our doorstep. So I think there's a lot to be said for being in Guildford. And all three of the founders are have been from this area for the last 20 odd years, so there's a longevity there, and we've all got a bit of a sweet spot for Guildford.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like it says, when you were sort of smaller, I'm thinking it's not, and I remember this myself. It's not so much of a problem recruiting in your local region, but as you start to scale the business and get larger, you sometimes need to add more experience, and if there aren't an abundance of large agencies, you don't get an abundance of a large talent pool to recruit from. So you're right, you almost have to rely on those people who have worked in bigger agencies that maybe are looking to either reverse commute or are looking to relocate to your area. I guess, of course, post COVID, maybe. I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute and what you're doing, where you are in your process with that. But I guess it is it's one of those things that obviously working remotely in the future, it might help you, I guess, and all regional agencies, it might help them now get access to better talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. And we can talk about that in a bit. I think previously doing our event like WXG definitely helped up the profile of the agency, and it also helped us to get across some of the cultural touchstones and what's important for us. We've used that to attract people to us. The culture play has been, a really important part of the agency for a long time, and that's been a big part of our recruitment strategy as well.
Yeah, I mean, and you also got involved with organising the TEDx in Guildford, didn't you? Or you certainly helped towards organising that. So,
yeah, we've done that for the last 3 years. Again, that's kind of part of being part of the Guildford community, really. So yeah, we have organised TEDx Guildford. Unfortunately, that's obviously got cancelled this year, and we're still a bit unclear about what's going to happen about that next year. But we've enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I observed that you did, which I thought was really smart as well, was you used to do something called Web Meetup Guildford. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you still do that now?
Well,
obviously not now with COVID, but
now
probably will you do that? Continue to do that moving forwards, or?
Yeah, I think it needs reinventing. We did it for a number of years, and that was basically where we would just go to a local bar, stick a credit card behind, and just say to everyone in the community, hey, come meet us, have a free beer and have a chat. And actually, again, that was a good way of recruiting and just getting to know the competition, helping create partnerships, and have some free beer.
Has some fun as well.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love a free beer? Yeah, I think I think, you just outlined 3 very important lessons, by the way, for anyone who, wherever your agency is, if you can organize some kind of thought leadership event local to where you are in the community, because you guys, you invite your competitors to come as well. This isn't just only, if you're a brand that works in, that would potentially need your services. Is pretty much anyone who works in digital and technology is allowed to come, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think I think there's always an opportunity with your competitors to create alliances, partnerships, or just look them straight in the eye and get a real sense of who they are.
Brilliant. So yeah, I think again, massive. Just as reiterate, it's a massive lesson. Try and bring your community together. Run local events. That are thought leadership and and bring out the brands and the competitors and bring everybody out together. Also from a talent management point of view, if you can bring out the talent who are working in organisations, then that's a really great place to be able to recruit back from, but also maybe find leads from. But as you say, build other partnerships and alliances. And just, I think, so I think there's 2 really fantastic strategies. And then lastly, getting involved with something like TEDx, or getting involved with, another event that happens, locally in the community where you can build, more connections and stronger networks, right? I think that's a really good lesson for anyone looking to grow their business that is more regional. I think if you're in a big city, you can still do these things, but there's probably a lot more people doing them, and it can be a lot more competitive, right? So I don't know. Do you think WXG would have worked if you did it in London, or do you think that it's just too much similarity? And
I think we probably would have struggled.
Yeah.
I think potentially we could make it work if it was maybe a more focused event, but it has quite a wide remit around technology. For example, the last one was technology for good. I think, potentially if we created an event which was very sort of laser focused down, that could work. But who knows what's happening with events, in-person events now. Just so much in the air. So
yeah. How are you feeling about it? We're obviously, where are we now? We're October. We're probably going into month 7, I think it is. I worked out the other day. We're certainly 6 or 7 months in. How do you feel personally? Do you feel like there's going to come a point next year where everyone is just desperate to go out and go to an event? Or do you think a lot of people will go, oh, do you know, I just don't know if I need to do this anymore. I can just dial in remotely when I want to and save the time, you know?
Yeah, and I think that there has been a bit of a mindset change, and I think events will change for the foreseeable. I think a lot of people have realised actually that they can get a lot of value from not actually having to attend through webinars. I think, of course, people are also going to want some events where they are actually meeting people in person. But I also think that the cost, the environmental issues, and actually the fact you can get a lot of value from the online only arena means that events going forward will change hugely.
Yeah, it's just the meeting people, isn't it, part, which I think is probably one of the big value pieces there. It's getting to meet people, and and I know lots of people have got these interactive platforms now, virtual reality type platforms where you can go to events. There's quite a few popping up. So, but and I guess they'll have virtual bars and places you can go and meet. But it's just, I think that human element side of it, I wonder, you know, will there be a missing piece of the value of a live event, you know?
Yeah,
because you just never know who you're going to sit next to or who you're going to meet over a sandwich or whatever. And so I've heard so many stories over the years of so much business being won, you know, by people attending events. And you know, two people, one great story once I heard as a client of ours who ended up pitching for Porsche because they picked up a vegan sandwich at the same time somebody else did, and they realized they were both vegans, and it started the conversation of what they both did, and it led to a fantastic opportunity. I think it might have gone on to be a client as well. But so, you know, what happens to those pieces of magic, I wonder, but we'll see.
Yeah. I hope they come back. I really do. You're right. I mean, those soft touch points are so important from a new business perspective, as well as from a perspective of working with your colleagues as well. And it's something that we're all missing a lot at the moment.
Yeah, so let's talk about that now. Let's move on to that. So you've, in fact, no, before I do that, I want to just cover off one thing. So when you've evolved, you started off, as you said, today you're maybe doing a handful of websites a year, but mainly more as probably part of a larger, you know, product you're developing. I'm guessing, you know, maybe it's a something that complements something that you're doing, but or it's a front end entry point to, you know, a platform or application you've developed. But when you go back to those early days and the way the business changed, how did you evolve the business forward? What do you think the steps were that you took, you know, to make those changes?
Yeah, I think I remember we hit a bit of a ceiling at around the sort of £1.5 to £2 million mark, where I think probably more through our structure and the way we structured the business, we couldn't break through any further. So one of the things we did, we looked at evolving our structure to make it a bit more scalable. Previously, it had been myself, Gav, and Laurent, who I suppose in some ways we ran our own pods of clients, where we would go out and we'd meet the clients, we'd win the business, we'd then end up producing the business, and then we'd end up actually billing the business and also chasing down the payment. And of course, I think you reach a point where you can't go any further. So we started to look at the structure there. Getting in a finance manager was a big step for us. Someone to handle the day-to-day running of the finances and making sure that we are being paid on time.
Always helps.
Absolutely, and also starting to build out a client services function, and starting putting in independent pod structures, so that it wasn't the owners of the business who were who were maintaining the relationships, but dedicated client partners. I think that definitely helped us to step up the game and move to the next level. I think also a big jump was building out a marketing department as well. Like I said, we had been a bit guilty of keeping ourselves to ourselves really, and just relying on referral, which is still an important part of the way we win business today. But I think we'd got to a point where that was only taking us so far, and we needed to move to the next level. We needed to shout a bit more about ourselves.
I guess as well, what you're kind of saying there is funny because when in my day job at Cactus, whenever someone or contacts one of us and they say, we've got a problem in the business, and it can be lots of different problems. I mean, there's many things it can be. It's funny how many times it always goes back to the team structure, like, because if you and I'm guessing the reason you answered it the way you did was because you guys were so involved in the business in a way, by putting the right structure in, you were able to then work much more on the business, and therefore, and I think at 1.5 million, I think we wrote in the book, I call it the £1.5 million hump, because normally around that point you have to get the structure right to break through. But it then gave you time, I guess, to look more about what the services that you were offering, and that way you could be more, otherwise you don't see the wood through the trees, do you? You kind of like, you get to a position where you're so busy doing the do that you don't realize if your business is becoming commoditized, or you don't see how the market is changing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally right. I think, yeah, we were so involved with the business, and how hard it is being on the front end of clients and delivery, and how all-consuming it can be. It doesn't leave a lot of time for doing more the strategic thinking. I think we used to have one day a year in the old days when the three founders would get together and think about the strategic side of the business. So it sounds crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I think business is moving so fast these days that, I mean, I know that, and I mean, we have it at Cactus as well, where, we definitely have twice a year now, we go off site to try and work, I guess on a bigger platform, the strategy we're doing. But I think we probably need to move that to quarterly, because things are just moving so fast in the business world. You can't wait a year. Your business could be disrupted in a year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think building out a team around us has freed us up to focus on new roles, and then as we grow, we can then move on to the next new challenge. And I think that's what I love about agency life. I think for me, there has been a lot of variety.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that everyone will probably, I mean, I think, that's the difference between working in a brand or working in an agency. Definitely agencies give you huge amounts of variety, don't they? Like, there's always different clients, different problems to solve. And I think sometimes there's a difficult adjustment if you attract people from brand side, because they're just not used to that speed and they don't always adjust. And then likewise, I think if people leave agencies and go client side, they can get quite bored because they're just working on one thing very slowly. So I do think it's a good advantage. But I like the answers. As I said before, I like the fact that you put it down to structure, because as I said, when Pete and I get calls, or the rest of the team at Cactus, it's, I've got a sales problem. No, you haven't. You've got a structure problem. I've got a positioning problem. Well, maybe, but you probably fix your structure and you'll be able to fix your positioning. Like, there's so many times that's the root problem. So it's great that you guys, have got that, and it obviously works, right? Because now you're scaled up to what, probably 3 times the size that you were then, thinking about it. Yeah. So let's talk about. Sorry.
I think another important thing that I think we realised quite early on was always try and employ people who are better than you, and take the glory. And I think once upon a time I was a designer. Thankfully, we've got far better designers in-house now. And I think that's always been a good lesson for me.
Yeah, do you know, I'm laughing as well because, you know, when I started off, I was a front-end web developer, and I think it was my first recruit. I realised I wasn't a great front-end web developer, and I took on a junior who was better than me. So I think it's a really, really good point that, you know, no matter how, and I still see it. You know, I still go into agencies now, Piers, and I see people just not, you know, they won't hang up the tools, and they're doing work that, you know, in the business, and yeah, they're talented, of course, but you know, they're doing £100 an hour work when they should be doing 500 or £1,000 an hour work running the business, and trying to make them understand that that difference is a challenge. But you've got to do what you love, haven't you, as well? And I guess the three of you have had to, along that journey, have probably had to reinvent your roles quite a bit as well to keep fresh, but also with new challenges coming up. But you, in particular, you've kind of gone from being quite client services focused, I've seen, to almost now being much more running the culture. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's
amongst other things.
Yeah, there are a few other things as well, but actually that's a bit that I love, and I've realised that what I enjoy about agency life is the culture, and it is enjoying working with people. So I've always been a firm believer that a workplace where your staff are happy means they are far more engaged. So I think, you know, it's so worth dedicating the time and energy to trying to get that right. And I think that's the interesting part of the business for me, actually. It's about, you know, how can we design a culture where people feel fulfilled in their work, and they've got a sense of where they're going, and they feel valued, and they like doing what they do. So I find that really sort of fascinating, how you can shape and get the best out of people.
So I have been privy to some of your office vibe scores. Those people who are listening don't know office vibes at all. That sort of, you know, engages team members and sees and it asks them to basically score you, give you an NPS scoring amongst other ratings, and it breaks down different areas. Are you still using Office Vibe, by the way? You are. So, and those scores were really, really, I mean, some of the highest I've seen come out of an agency. So you guys have clearly got a lot of things right on your culture. I mean, you have reasonably, you know, very low staff turnover. I've seen that as well. I've seen, you know, so what's the secret then, Piers? What's the Kyan secret to your culture?
What is the secret? I suppose it's being authentic to ourselves. I think it's kind of understanding who we are, and recruiting people who we think can support that and help grow that side of the business. So we have geekiness has always been one of our kind of main core values here at Kyan. You know, what we do is play with tech, and we're curious about tech. We're curious about design. So it's making sure we recruit against that. But I think one of the sort of overriding and important ways of playing that is through generosity. So our other main value is being about generous to each other. I think when we started the agency, we didn't want to create another agency with sort of strict hierarchies and pyramid-based structures where we have bosses. I think that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to build an environment where, you know, even the quietest voice felt listened to, and that still remains true today. And I think that's what's enabled us to thrive. Is not having that kind of traditional hierarchy, but having a flat structure or flatter structure. I think we've wrestled with the term flat for a few years, because I don't think you can ever be purely flat, but I think we strive to try and make it as flat and fair as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I think that is a very, very good point. I mean, I appreciate, because you're always going to have directors or owners in a business, so it can never be necessarily truly flat, but there's no question the agencies that flatten their structures and remove bureaucracy and hierarchy, power, definitely are happier businesses, and happier businesses means less staff turnover, better client, all the things you just mentioned. So I think there's definitely some key ingredients there. And so tell me though, what the impact has been on because you've got, for me, going into COVID, you've got this amazing culture, it's a fantastic business. I'm just curious to know, it's probably, there's been a lot of change in the last 6 months, a lot of disruption and transformation to the way that your team are working. How have you dealt with that? How have you managed it? And what are you doing? Have you found a way forward yet, or is it still work in progress?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Obviously, it's been a roller coaster, like it has for everyone. I think in the early days of COVID, back in March and April, when we had projects dropping out and programs being cancelled, it was it was quite a scary time. But I suppose operationally, the move to working remotely has been more or less seamless for us. I think all our tools, like most people, are in the cloud now. And even though often in the studio we would sit next to each other, rather than actually speak to someone, you'd end up slacking someone anyway. So there was, there was that culture of communicating digitally anyway. So that was pretty painless. But having gone through this kind of roller coaster where we saw lots of projects drop out, actually we realized that the main concern, like it is for a lot of businesses, is around pipeline and sales. So as the three founders, we just knuckled down and said something which you've always talked about, Spencer, was just reach out to people. So we targeted ourselves with doing 50 conversations a month each to try and help build that pipeline, and lo and behold, it started to work. So
do you know what, Piers? I've been using that line. I used to call it 50 new conversations, and so nowadays it's sort of meaningful, or you called it something else. But since about 2012, last 8 years, I've been talking about that. Try and do 50 calls, and it's so funny how much backlash, or how much I saw a comment online not long ago, someone in Manchester saying, it was on a Manchester publications blog, as all these people spouting out 50 people a month. I don't want to do that. I want to just, and I was just thinking, yeah, but if you don't want your business to grow, it doesn't matter. But if you do want your business to grow, it's such a simple task to do, and it is so effective. And I mean, you guys just sort of started focusing on it again. What was the impact of you doing that, out of interest?
Well, it probably 2.5 to 3 months after doing that, our pipeline was in the best position it had been for over 12 months. So
during this period as well.
Yeah. So it has made a big difference, and it's given us a real kind of sense of optimism about moving forward. So so that's been quite a good learning, and it was good to know that we could actually pull a lever and make something happen.
Yeah. I mean, Piers, I talked to Nathan Lomax in a previous episode about this, and Piers is probably more, Nathan is probably more like me, right? So, he's more extroverted. And so, a lot of people will say, yeah, well, it's easy for you, Spencer, Nathan, to talk to 50 people a month because that's the way that you are. But I would say that you, Laurent, and Gav are not mass extroverts. I mean, this is your first podcast. I think you've done about 1 or 2 speaking gigs before. You guys are quite inward looking, definitely more, as you said, from the history, although you've got marketing in and you've become, you've focused on doing great work, and you put in the marketing and you're getting it out there. But I think what advice would you give to people out there who are more like the three of you, because who've got, who need to build their pipeline, who need to do these calls? Because I think it'd probably be quite good hearing that from you.
Yeah, I think actually it's easier than you think, especially at the moment. I find something about doing it across Zoom or whatever platform you use. It's more barriers are broken down. So there's something quite sort of humanizing about chatting with someone when you can see their kids rolling around in the background, or dog tails wagging in front of the camera. So I have definitely found that easier than
walking into a room full of people in suits or whatever, sort of a forced networking thing. It's
absolutely, yeah. And I think people sort of recognise that now. So I think that there is a degree of that corporate armour, I think, that's been removed from conversations at the moment, which I have found it easier to deal with. And each time I speak to someone, I ask them for an introduction to someone else, and it builds up its own kind of critical mass.
Okay, and so how did you start? Who did you sort of, who were your first 50? Where did you find them?
I think I just went through LinkedIn. Good old LinkedIn.
Just sent them a message going, "Hey, love to catch up for a Zoom chat."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think throughout this period we've learned that we can pull some levers. That we have to get on the sales tip. I think one of the problems that, not so much a problem perhaps, but one of the challenges that I think we see coming forward is around the cultural side of the business.
Yeah.
Being removed, as we said, we have lost a lot of those softer touch points. So
is that because when everyone was, because I know that you've always had a reasonably flexible approach, but most people still go into the office because you just have this great bond as a team. I think you are definitely one of the agencies that I've been into your offices and I've seen that you do have that incredible, you do, there's like, you walk in, there's a really nice feeling when you walk into your office. There's it's a subtle buzz. It's not crazy, but it's there, and it feels like everyone gets on well. And I guess are you worried then that if it does go remote working, that you might lose that part of the culture?
Yeah, that is definitely a concern for me. How can we? Because I think otherwise you can become quite siloed if you're working remotely. You might be quite siloed just with working with the team who's working on the project that you're working on. So that is definitely a concern for me. And I think we tired of all the Zoom quizzes quite early on. So I think we're trying to find more creative ways of managing that, and we actually have a plan now for starting in 2021, which I'm going to be sharing with the team in the next month, about a bigger package and a new way of working, and unsurprisingly, it's going to involve a lot more flexibility. But I think one of the things that we'll have to do is I think we need to create special events, touch points throughout the year calendar in the agency to bring people together around. So whether that's, bringing in external speakers, whether it's having competitions, whether it's having team building games, whether it's organising more Kyan mountain biking trips or survivalist weekends. I think they're the things that we need to double down on now, because I think we know that we can work remotely, but can we still work remotely and maintain our culture of kind of generosity and geekiness?
Yeah. And I get it as well, because personally, I've been one of these people who I've loved the shift to, that lockdown caused a shift to working more remotely, because I was spending quite a large amount of my week commuting, and I find it quite exhausting, if I'm honest. And I feel like I've got more energy and more lease of life back in me as a person, because the flexible and remote working has given me that energy. And I think, I have noticed, you can't really stereotype this too much, but definitely, the younger you are, the more you crave social interaction, and you want that. And then I guess as you get a little bit more, to my age, I can say our age.
I don't think I'm quite as old as you, am I, Spencer?
I think you are. So you're a month older or a month younger than me? I'm
April.
I'm 30th. What day are you?
Well, I guess I have to be before that, really, don't I?
Yeah. There is no 31st. You're right. Right, you're just slightly older. But the point is that I think, I've got an opportunity. So have I done any? I don't think I've done a meeting for 6 months in an office. I'm just trying to double check that. But I have got an opportunity. I've got an agency audit to do on Friday, and they're going to be doing it at a hotel in Hampshire. So not, it's probably a 3/4 hour drive. So it's not too far away. But actually, I really want to go because I'm feeling a little bit cooped up, And so it's the first time. It's taken 6 months, and that's why I think we still can't underestimate what the long-term impacts of this is, because people right now who are feeling, yes, this is great, this is perfect, I still feel that, as things get a bit back to normal, there'll be certain things that, that you still want to do.
Yeah, I agree. But also, I think it's also an opportunity to reinvent how we do operate. I think we have got in the habit, perhaps, of, we sort of got into these old ossified habits, the way we ran the business. And I think there's this opportunity now to actually reinvent that a little bit. So I think that's quite exciting in some ways. And again, that's a big sort of cultural thing. So I find that interesting.
I so agree with what you just said there. I think the reinvention I think event business got in the habit of doing things the way it's done them for too many years. I think the event space itself was ripe for disruption. And, I've been hearing some fantastic stories about artists and the ways that some of that they're looking to reinvent the way they do their gigs and events and other such other such examples of the way people are reapproaching events. And you think about, as you mentioned it before, the environmental impact of, all of the flights every year, going to events and stuff, the unnecessary impact that has. I still kind of half laugh at Greta Thunberg when she was in Bristol earlier. They're talking about how the primary thing is that it's the air pollution that causes all of the impact. And we were going to go to South by Southwest this year, and Pete and I genuinely looked at alternative modes of transport to get to apart from sailing our own boat, which I didn't really fancy doing across the Atlantic, but actually it was very limited choices to be able to get across, in an eco-friendly way. And so actually, for me, just to summarize, I think event business and some businesses just needed disruption or an acceleration of that. It's like for the first time in history, technology outstrips business demand, where, historically, technology wasn't keeping up with business demands. Now it outstrips it. Most businesses are behind the technology they really should have in place to run their business. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're seeing so much transformation, and why you guys are probably so busy, because that's kind of one of the main things you do. But I think COVID, do you remember that there was that meme going around early on? Who's had the biggest impact on your digital transformation or your business transformation? Is it your CEO, CIO, or COVID? And it's amazing how COVID has almost forced, I think, a lot of businesses to rethink the way they work, to look at things in a different way. And hopefully, you're right, this kind of like willful blindness sometimes in life, we've been guilty of it. I mean, the amount of times I've commuted, and spent 4 or 5 hours a day, and the reality is not once did I stop and think or insist that I just do these things remotely. So you are right, it's a kind of a habit.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity to create a better life-work balance at the moment.
Yeah.
I love coming into the studio, and actually I thrive off the energy of having other people around me. So I find working from home can be quite challenging. So for me, I'm going to plan to come to the office probably 3 days a week, but work 2 days at home.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice balance. That really does. So tell me about the team. What can you tell me about your future plans? Have you decided yet? Are you in the process? What's the you've served? I know the process was that you surveyed everyone just to get feedback, because I think that's a really important thing if agency owners are listening, or people working in the agency and they haven't been surveyed, would you recommend that process?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, for us, it's about understanding what the team feel comfortable about, and what they want. Obviously, that we have business to run as well. But I think the first point of the call is making sure that the team are comfortable and happy. And unsurprisingly, no one is particularly comfortable coming back to the office full time at the moment. And actually, there's no real requirement for them.
So not one person wants to come back full time.
No. So yeah, we've done some thinking around that, and we are going to make quite a relatively dramatic change to the way we work. I can't really say too much at the moment because I obviously need to.
Oh no, of course. No, but what I'm saying. But you're in the process. That was the thing, and obviously from that you're going to come up with some kind of plan. I take it that that hopefully. So it's interesting because I spoke to a friend of mine who was in Seattle, who runs a probably $1 billion business out there, and he was saying to me that he was already seeing evidence that a lot of the office spaces out there has been cut back and is being transformed more. So certainly, finding creative ways to change your office space to make it more second home, to offer more different options so people feel like they're working remotely, almost like you create your own space to encourage people to come in. Not force people, but to make it more exciting, more of a reason to come in. And so, that I think that there are going to be some great changes there as well.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of the clubhouse mentality, where where we do have events, so that people feel like they want to come in, and building this calendar around that.
Yeah, did you read something like someone? I read an article last week about Clubhouse. Somebody said something about that. They said, I don't know if you've read it or whether that's a coincidence, but something I came across. It said, offices will be almost more like the Virgin Clubhouse. It was like, for those who don't know, you have kind of this, instead of having a normal lounge, you have a lounge that has a hairdressers in it. It has. It has like an area where you can watch TV or sports matches. You have like an eating area within it, and that it offers you. You can work in there. You can meet in there. You got a business center in there. So, I think the Clubhouse is a really good example of how I probably would my best guess would be how offices will sort of transform and move forwards.
Yeah, I mean, we already have some of that in place here. We're lucky in that respect. We have, we have a bar, we have a kind of bleachers presentation space and a separate canteen stroke kitchen. So I think we've
desking working spaces. You've got those, haven't you, as well? You've got desks.
So I think we've got a space which we're locked into with our lease. We can't get out of. So and actually we love our space. So let's make the most of it. So I don't think we have to make too many changes to what we already have to make it work in a more of a clubhouse approach.
Yeah, definitely. I think it'd be very interesting to see a year from now. Maybe we'll have to do this another one of these maybe a year or 18 months from now and see what happens in the end. How did things change? How did they, and in terms of service delivery, how have you found that through this period as well? If you did, as you rightly said something actually, which is very, very true. A lot of agencies, people, were already working remotely in a way in the offices because they're using Slack and tools to communicate. So does the service delivery, have you had to adapt it much?
Not really, no. I would say. I mean, as you said,
virtual
Slack
workshops, I guess, are quite.
GitHub. We moved our workshops to a remote format, and a lot of the feedback we've got is that actually they've been better remote.
I agree.
they've been more equalising. They haven't been dominated by the most dominant person in the room. So we've actually had feedback from our clients saying we really like this format. It works well. And some of the great tools out there now, things like Miro and Murally, I think are really helping us manage that process well. And it becomes easier to organise those workshops as well. I think previously when we had workshops, I remember we had teams coming over from the US to spend a week here and having to book themselves up in the local travel lodge. Now, we haven't got any of that headache. It's become a bit easier, I think, to organise those workshops.
Do you know that that is fascinating, because I've experienced exactly the same thing. I think our workshops that we do are better now, and we used to net promoter score them, and the tactical workshop days, and we always got straight 10s for them. And I said to Pete when we did our first remote one, I bet we get an 8 or a 9 now because we're not there in person. And we got a 10, and then another 10, and then another 10. And I'm with you. I think they are better, and it might be you're right, because it can be more equal. I think a lot of the maybe more dominant people aren't as dominant on a call, or you can just mute them if they are. And so I think that's a very interesting and I wonder, did you work harder at making them better as well, or not? Do you think it just transferred?
Yeah, we did go through a stage where we had to reinvent them, and there was a reasonable amount of work putting that in place. But our man Harry Ford, who looks after all our product strategy, has done a great job in helping put that together.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. So do you think, again, in the future, you'll end up doing more hybrid versions where you have some remote, some inside? Because I think we've been looking at we're doing some mastermind workshops ourselves at the moment. And although actually the first one we've got, I'm pretty sure the majority of people want to come in person, which is quite interesting. But we're going to do a hybrid where people can dial in and can be in the room together. So I guess that's probably going to have to get that working quite slick in a way where you can get both working well.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. And actually, we have been talking to a client about how we can handle both those different camps, the ones who want to be there in person and the ones who are going to be working remotely. And I think we've decided that it's probably, it can be delivered remote first, and that's where we'll have to approach it. But also, we'll have people there as well. So, and it's not something we've actually done yet, but I think it will happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned the product Miro. Miro's been one that I've been really impressed with as well. I've used it a few times in board meetings, and I've got to say, I really like it. I think it's just so easy to use, and where in the past those tools have been quite clunky. I think the collaborative tools when you're trying to work together. So, and maybe in a way, in a real meeting, you have got to get things out on post-it notes, which is nice to a certain degree, but Miro keeps it all on a screen, so there are definitely some advantages. What about Zoom fatigue, that sort of thing? Just lastly on this subject, do you think there's any long-term impact or effects of, because I think most people have obviously been looking at a screen in your business so I've just got a message from Caitlin, that's why I put my thumb up, just letting me know certain things. What our time check is. In the last podcast, she put the sign up here, and me and the other guests go, "What does it say?" We couldn't read it. It's quite funny, but so obviously people work on computers all day long, but I think it's different working on them all day long, and then sometimes talking to people on them all day long. I certainly have noticed it. I mean, I definitely. I was just saying to my wife this morning, I'm actually gonna sort of do more meditations through the day now, because I need the brain reset, because my brain's getting fuzzy because I'm trying to look at people, read their body language, and have a conversation, and looking at a screen, right, a 2D version of you. It's difficult, I think.
It is, and I think you said body language there. I think when you can't see someone's body language, you just see their talking head. Your brain is working overtime to try and fill in the gaps. So I think that's why you have this sort of extra cognitive load when you're working with Zoom.
Another product,
yeah. So I mean, I think everyone has their own tactics for this. It's making sure that you do build in breaks. It's about making meetings 30 minutes or 45 minutes so that you've always got a break before the next one kicks in.
Not having over 1 hour podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what's next for Kyan on your journey then? I guess there's probably an element of trying to sort of settle down in this I'm trying not to use the word new norm anymore. For 2021, it's probably coming back to just getting the business back to some kind of, business as usual.
Yeah. I think 2020, if we can, the initial ambition, I don't think we're going to fulfill because of COVID, but I think if we can break even, maybe a little bit better than that, we'll see that as a win this year. So I think for the final quarter, really, it's about getting ourselves ready to really accelerate in 2021. So I think it's about getting fit for 2021 for the rest of the year now. We have definitely seen the pipeline grow. We've seen a need. People are recognizing that digital transformation, building digital tools is a key part of what they need to accelerate now to help them get through this strange time. So I'm feeling quite confident and optimistic, and we're looking for a little bit of a growth spurt come 2021. And actually, we're slowly starting to do that now, and we're starting to put out feelers around recruitment. And because of the more kind of distributed working approach, we're finding that actually that's much easier and getting access to better quality people.
Great. I mean, I think that's your summary. I think is far from unique. Around trying to get this year to won't be as much of a disaster as potentially the economy would end up at the end of the year. But I think it's a really important lesson that you just said there. I mean, from my perspective, I think if technology plays a part in your marketing or your agency services, then really you should still be growing. I think the sectors that got hit, were travel, high street retail, obviously leisure, leisure industry, because people the movement around the pubs and hotels and restaurants. Yes, they got hit. But there are really only a handful of sectors, in my opinion, that got hit. And a lot of agencies did have clients in those spaces. And so some agencies have been hit quite badly, especially the big ones, because the likelihood that you had a client in one of those spaces is probably quite high. But then you look at the SaaS companies, or you look at the online retailers, and the whole D2C space, which is just complete explosion. And all of a sudden, you realize that the market is much bigger than that. And I think what you've just said to me, I hope everyone listening understands, try and avoid listening to the mainstream news at the moment, which is just, doesn't only wants to, well, has it ever changed? Always wants to share the bad news stories. But the reality is that, I think next year is looking really positive. I really do. But most people wouldn't say that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's an opportunity.
Yeah. So, well, that's good. We can end on a positive note then. Yes. So what do you think then? Give me a number. Sorry, excuse me. Do you think 10% growth next year, 20%? Or would you be happy with 5?
I think it probably is going to be about around the 10 mark, 10% mark.
I think everyone should basically set that as their minimum. I think it would be a really smart thing to do. Go for 10. I think a lot of agencies grow typically 20-30% a year. Certainly the sub £5 million crew, they normally grow quite aggressively, sometimes even faster when they are smaller. But 10%. I think that's a good tip for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's probably ambitious enough. Obviously, I'm not sure that's been signed off with our head of finance yet, but I'm sure
You
he'll be
make the
behind.
top draw target then. We'll let
Yeah.
him give you a more realistic one.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for your time today. It's been great speaking to you. You have really got a lovely business, and I can't think of a better person to spend my 30th episode. And actually, do you know what? It must be a year anniversary. I should have looked before. I must get better at preparing. But I'm pretty sure this is probably about probably the final episode of the year. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for inviting me on board. It's been great fun chatting with you, as ever.
I'll let you get back to doing your shopping in B&Q.
I'm going to build something now.
Yeah, I'll let you get on and build something. Thanks, Piers.
Yeah. Thanks, Spencer. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Some really interesting points today. I think the takeaways for me from this episode very much that you have to understand that your business will evolve. You'll probably, in your agency journey, you'll probably end up selling a service that you at some stage that you didn't even exist when you start your business. That's the rate of change that is happening in the agency space. So you have to be prepared to evolve moving forward, and clearly Kyan have done that, but they also recognize when they hit that certain point where they couldn't break through, that they had to get the structure right to do that. And I think that's really one of the most important things when you get between 1 and 2 million turnover, to get that structure right, to give you the platform to scale, but also to be able to hopefully evolve your product lines moving forwards, because you're not sort of so stuck in the business you can't see it. And then lastly, let's set a target for everyone for 10% growth next year. What a great thing to do, at least 10%, and then attack it with a more positive mindset, because I genuinely believe that there is every opportunity for any agency to go out there next year and perform easily in excess of 10% growth and not get caught up with the noise. Oh, I got a love heart. That's nice. So don't know, is that you?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. See, I was like, where did that come from? So the talk that Skype saw. Anyway, thanks ever so much for joining us. Don't forget to hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll see you in episode 31. This is that awkward moment where you don't know if it's finished or not. Caitlin?